Hey everyone, I'm Pak MMA, and you may be wondering, is Della Maddalena versus Islam Makhachev really that 50-50, or that one-sided? When predicting a fight, there are several key factors to analyze. What are each fighter's strengths and weaknesses? How do those attributes specifically affect each other stylistically? What is the context or circumstance of the matchup? And their previous opponent's skill level in relation to these other factors. So, to talk about strengths and weaknesses, I tend to define strengths and weaknesses with a level of specificity. It's not enough to say that Benoit Saint-Denis has good grappling and that so does Renato Moicano, so they'll be relatively even, and Benoit Saint-Denis has more powerful striking, whereas Moicano is considered to be pretty chinny. Now, you can see the line of thought here in outlining these pretty vague strengths and weaknesses. However, this level of analysis is clearly insufficient to accurately predicting a fight because Moicano would go on to 10-7 BSD in the first round and eventually win via doctor's stoppage. You have to be a little bit more specific about strengths and weaknesses in a matchup when you want to predict a fight accurately. Like, you can be vague, but you want to, be a little bit more specific. Take Max Holloway versus Arnold Allen as an example, where Holloway is great at utilizing kicks from range along with straight punches, all while setting a high pace. In contrast, Arnold Allen has success in the boxing range, while still being susceptible to being caught, but being incredibly fast and good at keeping momentum. These strengths and weaknesses don't have to be hyper-specific, but they have to certainly be specific enough to only apply to a handful of fighters. If you can say that strength for just about anybody, it's probably not specific enough. Alright, now that I've rambled on, let's outline some strengths and weaknesses of Della Maddalena. Della Maddalena is a pretty heavy-handed boxer with a underrated kicking game, decent takedown defense, but amazing scrambling ability. But what specifically makes Della great? For one, he makes great use of the high guard in MMA. I'm sure you've heard this before, being able to lead with his head to defend takedowns and quickly dig up underhooks. He's also capable of not just fighting from both stances, but also switch hitting, an extremely potent tool at the highest levels of modern MMA. Jack is also a pretty infamous body puncher, having 2 body shot TKOs in the UFC, along with great pressure and cage cutting when it gets close to the wall. There are more strengths to list, like his defensive ability and some of his more niche attacks, but I don't think I need to get that specific. Moving to some of his weaknesses, Jack has been controlled on the mat in the past. Despite his ability to scramble, Jack has also been controlled up against the cage in a few fights, but he generally seems less comfortable in clinch positions and he tries to avoid them. JDM has also been caught in submission attempts while scrambling, like in his fight with Emiev, and he tends to sit on his knees during a scramble, which is certainly a bad tendency to have against Islam, as I'll talk about him now. Islam Makhachev has a lot of standout strengths since he was, well, the pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the world. One of Islam's best strengths is his comfort in the clinch, with great knees from the Thai plum, beautiful sweeps and throws. He also has recently developed dangerous attacks from the front headlock, with his 2 most recent fights finishing via Darce choke. Islam's also shown recently that he has decently high-level combinations, counterpunching, and distance management on the feet. He also probably has the highest level kicking game of any of JDM's opponents. Although I consider Islam to be a counter-striker for the most part, when he is moving forward and applying pressure, he can mask his more traditional takedowns and strikes very well. He also has pretty good back control, doesn't typically lose it when he gets to it, and at this point in his career, he has had some decent amount of high-level 5-round experience. Some final points to add in, Islam is certainly, he certainly has that lighter man skill. In general, being described as an extremely strong guy. Not really that specific, but alright, well, who cares? Islam, although the former pound-for-pound #1, does have some weaknesses. For one, I think his takedowns from open space are pretty hit or miss. In some of his more recent performances, he's shown to get his takedowns stuffed or stalled up against the cage, a couple amount of times, like against Poirier and the first Volk fight, obviously. His takedowns from the clinch have been more effective, although take that point with a grain of salt because he obviously shoots more from space than he does from the clinch. Islam also used to be the best defensive fighter statistically. I think that was before the Oliveira fight. But he has shown a weakness to straight shots down the center along with switch hitters. I'd also say Islam, despite showing great striking in a lot of his recent performances, still looks stiff and awkward at times. And despite his strengths in the clinch, he also has shown to get a bit lazy, seemingly, when fatigued in the Poirier fight. Final point to add on, even though Islam has shown great back control, some of his stand-up performances have shown that he can get lazy sometimes and fail to even be particularly dangerous there. Islam's also struggled on the feet with guys that tend to switch stances or even just being in a close stance matchup. To add to this weakness on the feet, Islam's also been pretty guilty of being a headhunter. He doesn't typically throw punches to the body, and it's mainly just a round kick and knees for Islam when it comes to lower body strikes. Now, before dissecting some more specifics of the matchup, let's just look at some of the circumstances of this fight, just some stats and stuff. Islam Makhachev is riding a 15-fight win streak in the UFC with 6 submissions and 3 KO TKOs. He'll be moving up from lightweight to welterweight for this fight. Relevant to this fight, I'd say, is that Islam is currently on a 2-fight Darce choke win streak, like I said before, finishing both Poirier and Moicano with this short grip Darce. I'm not entirely sure if he finished Poirier with the short grip. He may have used a more traditional finish, so don't quote me on that. Jack has been on a somewhat similar run here, being on a 8-fight win streak in the UFC with 4 KO TKOs and 1 submission. He's overall on an 18-fight win streak across all promotions. I feel like something people are missing about this fight is that it's not like Volk Islam 3 in the sense that JDM represents Volk in a welterweight form, but more so that this is like Volk versus Islam 1 in the sense that JDM is in the same position Islam was in when he fought Volk the first time. Now, you might say, like, that's obvious. Islam was a reigning champ moving up the same way Volk was, but my point here is more that this is an entirely new challenge for Islam, unlike anything he's done previously, just like Volk in the first fight. So what I'm saying is that it's not like Islam is simply just adjusting for Jack. He's also adjusting for the different environment, the perhaps easier but still different weight cut. It's not seemingly just Dagestan versus Australia, the trilogy. I mean, it is still that, but you get what I'm saying. In the same vein though, Jack does have all the benefits of having a grappling coach like Craig Jones, who has prepared Volk thoroughly for Islam and can make adjustments accordingly for Jack in this camp. Islam is also taking creatine for this camp.
I use like creatine.
So I guess that plays a factor. Also, I think it's kind of important to factor that Islam has typically always had a size advantage over every opponent he's fought, and he's also been younger than basically every high-level opponent besides Arman when they first fought. JDM, besides Gilbert Burns, has fought basically at even with most of his opponents in his career. Anywho, now it's time to get into my more specific analysis of this fight. I think historically we've seen Islam struggle with these guys who are well-paced, switch hitters, and able to consistently defend or at least be active on the ground. In general, Islam's also shown to struggle against southpaws, and JDM is shown to be very capable of fighting from both stances. I think another huge strength for JDM is that he doesn't discriminate to the body. And although Poirier did a good job of investing to the body in the clinch versus Islam, JDM will dig combinations to the body outside of clinch exchanges, and against Islam, who typically relies on blocking instead of a ton of head movement for defense, I think JDM will take major advantage of those defensive tendencies in Islam's game. And I feel like this is another thing that people will say to discredit JDM's ability on the feet in comparison to Islam, and it's that JDM versus Bilal was a relatively competitive fight on the feet, and that versus Islam, who is probably a higher level striker than Bilal, he won't be dominating him on the feet. And the reason I think this is the wrong conclusion to make is because Islam is typically a counter striker, and while JDM has shown the same tendency and ability to fight on the back foot against a guy like Islam who doesn't like to press forward unless he's shooting or setting up a shot, JDM will most certainly look better on the feet and more dominant compared to the Bilal fight. In the Bilal fight, JDM was pretty comfortable pot-shotting Bilal and going for counter shot after counter shot, but against Islam, I imagine he'll be looking for longer, more pressure-heavy combinations like he has in most of his other fights. The biggest obstacle for JDM in this fight is the tempo of Islam's reactive takedowns to JDM's forward pressure. We could potentially see JDM approach this fight like the Bilal fight and just try to pick him apart from range and blast him when they eventually do meet in the pocket, where at that point they don't really have the energy or setups needed to get a good shot. Now, with all this said, I don't think this means that Islam can't have success on the feet. He certainly has a great head kick and a decent ability to counter, but I just don't see him winning a majority of exchanges on the feet. I feel like he'll still be able to win a couple, but we'll see JDM crowd him with body shots and Islam will tighten up his guard a little and reach for collar ties to clinch. I just think his body language in some of these exchanges will look a little off. But let's sort of talk about what's important here, the grappling. I think more so it's a matter of when and not if, because I think Islam will probably take JDM down a couple times, but I don't see JDM getting smudged or submitted easily. If anything, I do see Islam catching a couple close submission attempts, but I think JDM has shown composure in close situations like that against Imiev. And in wrestling, there are levels to takedown defense. You start with your head, your hands, and then it goes to your hips and your legs. And we've seen JDM's first line of takedown defense improve in the Bilal fight, where he's able to stuff a good amount of takedowns without having to resort to heavy scrambling, which will certainly help him reserve his gas tank. And on the mat, JDM's shown great urgency and activity on the ground, and although he did look iffy on the ground versus Burns, where he got caught in a cradle and a front headlock a couple of times, I still trust in JDM's camp and his ability to get up safely for the most part. It is kind of scary because his scramble heavy style does sort of lend itself to getting caught in these submission attempts more often, but I really can't say anything else other than I just trust in that ability. I guess I'll put it this way. My prediction is banking on the likelihood that JDM won't get submitted or taken down quickly enough for Islam to consistently win rounds, and more so that JDM will keep Islam at bay and pick him apart, invest to the body, and when he is eventually taken down, he'll either be able to get back up, or the control time and submission attempts won't matter for the case of Islam winning rounds or the fight. So overall, despite the potential advantages Islam will have over JDM in being a control-heavy grappler with a nasty front choke game, I just don't think I'm willing to predict based on basically a Hail Mary sort of thing. And not that Islam submissions are a Hail Mary, but it's more so that that's his method to win this fight, you know? Like, it's almost fluky in that sense. And I'm more inclined to believe that JDM can pacify Islam's submission and control heavy grappling and smack him up on the feet. I think if anything, this fight will look pretty similar to the Volk versus Ortega fight, where Volk looks pretty dominant on the feet and for the most part still gets caught in some dangerously close submission attempts. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say on this matchup. Thanks for watching, and subscribe to Pak MMA.